Yes, as you read in this title, we might very well be heading into a recession in 2023. And yes, you are absolutely in the right to think of this as scary news, at least before you watch this video. And that's because the truth is, a recession isn't necessarily scary news at all. That's why in this video, I'm going to reveal to you exactly how you can take advantage of this potential upcoming recession, how to build generational wealth, and how to build the life that you've always wanted. You might have heard of the popular saying, riches are made in recessions. The economy goes through regular cycles in which it moves from expansion to peak to contraction to recession, and then it all begins again. So what actually is a recession? Now, the technical term of a recession is when the economy actually goes through weak or negative periods of growth in 2 successive quarters. You might be asking, Fiona, what do you actually see during a recession? First, you'll see poor stock performance, right? We're all expecting stock values to go down. Second, you'll see a rise in consumer credit card debt. And oftentimes that's because people just can't afford the things because of high inflation, for example, like we're experiencing today. When they lose their jobs, they don't have extra money. And because of that, they then build up credit card debt because they have bills to pay. So for example, when you're worried that you're gonna lose your job, you're probably gonna spend less so you have more money on the sidelines. Now, when consumers spend less, that means businesses earn less income. And when businesses earn less income, that obviously means there's less demand for those businesses' products and services. And then when there's less demand, that means businesses need to somehow make sure their bottom line, in other words, their net profit, is somewhat sustainable. And oftentimes, how do they make it sustainable? They do it by slashing out their workforce. And that is so unfortunate, but it is sadly a pretty common sight, especially during a recession. So let's get down to business. How do you take advantage of the very next recession that's going to hit us? Here's how. Step 1 is cutting the fat. We're gonna try to trim every single expense that you have that's not necessary to keeping up your basic lifestyle. Here are some guidelines. First, you wanna save and invest more than 20% of your gross income. And if you're not at 20%, that's okay. Start building up to that 20% number, but that should definitely be a goal. And out of that, you want to pay less than 27 or 28% for housing debt. Now, housing debt means things like your principal, your interest, your insurance. And if you don't own a house, then that basically means renter's insurance or things of that nature. Another guideline that I live by when it comes to budgeting is spending less than 20% of my net income on consumer debt. Now, net income, for those of you who don't know, is essentially the money you take home after taxes are taken out. So your net income is generally gonna be much smaller than your gross income. Now, consumer debt means things like credit card debt, student loan debt, and the reason why is simply to be prepared for the worst. And by the worst, I mean being let go from your 9-to-5 job. So how do you actually start budgeting, my friend? Start writing a list and specifically create 3 columns on that list. The first column should say needs, the second column should say wants, and the third column should say wishes. Now I want you to start taking a look at all of your monthly expenses and list them. Now take a look at your completed list, your needs, wants, and wishes. It's time to systematically eliminate the expenses in the wants and in the wishes columns. And what you then cut out of these 2 columns, use that to either pay off debt or save and invest once the recession is there. Step 2 is that cash is no longer trash. What I mean by that is don't be afraid to hold some cash, right? As you're approaching a recession, it's actually not a bad idea to have some cash on hand. And the key word is some, not all. In my opinion, having cash on hand is kind of like dry powder, right? You have the dry powder ready to go. You're ready to literally infuse the cash into the stock market when the stock market goes down. That is your chance to actually dump your cash into the stock market and start buying stocks or indices when they are cheaper. So how do you make sure you have enough cash on hand? Here's how I do it. First, with every single paycheck I earn or any type of income I make, I set aside about 3% of that paycheck or income. That cash is outside of my emergency savings fund. Whenever I see an opportunity in the stock market, I go buy stocks. That's how I do it. Step 3 to prepare for a recession is starting a side hustle. I go by the rule, better safe than sorry. And honestly, I live by that rule. I always want to have some sort of plan B. And in my case, at least in the past, when I had my corporate 9-to-5 job, I didn't want to rely on just one single income stream. And that's why I started building my side hustle. And my side hustle helped me make more money on the side, especially in the case if I was let go in my corporate job. Now, to be honest, it's not going to be easy to start a side hustle, and you won't be successful if you don't necessarily execute and if you are not consistent. Trust me, take it from me, it can take a lot of work. So even though it won't be easy, it's so going to be worth it. Honestly, you can pick any type of side hustle and just start. So for example, you can pick walking dogs, which is probably not as difficult to start up, or you can build creating a website and becoming an affiliate marketer, which is what I did, and that was a little bit more difficult, especially on the startup front, because it took a lot of time and energy and money, but now it's completely worth it 3 years later though. So you really have to understand your own goal and understand your time frame, right? If you need to make money right now, then maybe building an affiliate platform might not be the best idea. Maybe instead you can start walking dogs, for example, or creating your own course, which is something that I would highly recommend if you do have a specialized skill set and can promote it as well. Honestly, I'm gonna throw in a little bonus here for you. If you're starting a side hustle, why not build your own business, especially in a recession? Building your own business could actually help you escape your 9-to-5 job in the future. All right, step 4 is develop another skill. Personally speaking, I am 100% positive that the best investment you can possibly make is right in here, in your mindset, right? And honestly, the reason why is because when you keep investing in yourself, that means your value keeps increasing because you gain more skills. That can also increase your value add to your job, which then can increase your salary as well. So how do you actually do that? Well, my friend, the good news is there are many different ways to start. Number 1, you could simply go on YouTube like you are right now and start watching videos about content that you need to learn in order to increase your skill set. Or you could buy a book. You could maybe even go to places like Udemy or Coursera, which are online platforms that literally teach courses to people like you and me. You can actually go to colleges that are world known like MIT, Yale, or Harvard, and they offer free online courses as well for people like you and me. So I might even check that out if I was you. Step 5, manage your 9-to-5 job. I go by the saying, better safe than sorry. And what I mean by that is I always want to think about the worst case scenario and make sure I kind of cover myself. So in this case, in a recession, what's gonna happen? You might actually be let go from your 9-to-5 depending on where you work and what industry you work in. And the absolute worst case scenario is in a recession, of course, the value of your stocks go down. And let's say you actually get let go from your job. So what do you have to do in order to pay the bills? In addition to taking on credit card debt, you might actually sell your stocks in order to generate cash to pay more bills. So how do you compete against that? It's time to leverage your 9-to-5 job. And what I mean by that is literally using everything you can in your current 9-to-5 job and trying to, for example, take advantage of your 401k match. If you have a 401k that's sponsored by an employer, for example, you contribute money and oftentimes your employer will match your contribution dollar for dollar up to a certain percentage of your income, right? Oftentimes that's about 3% or so of what you make. But in other words, that's free money. So why wouldn't you do that, right? That's something I would suggest. Another thing would probably be building your skill set, right? And making sure you continue using that skill set in your 9-to-5 job. Sometimes even 9-to-5 employers will pay for you to develop complementary skill sets. Maybe certifications or licenses or something like that would be completely sponsored by your employer. So why not take advantage of that now and try to not only increase your value to the company, but also your value overall and your knowledge. Step 6, when you prepare for a recession, is simply based on your mindset, right? Your mind is so important. And that's why they even have an entire category called behavioral investing and behavioral economics. As an example, if you're fully invested in the stock market, then on average, your returns will be about 7.7%. So the moral of the story here is to stay invested even if the stock market goes down. Why? Because in the end, that small dip in the stock market today is probably going to be a blip on the radar for you, especially if you're investing for the long term. Step 7 is preparing your investment strategy. So I'll give you insight into my own personal investing strategy that has helped me make tens of thousands of dollars in the 2020 COVID recession. So for me personally, I do a mixture between the DCA and the lump sum investing strategy. Now, the DCA strategy is also known as the dollar cost averaging strategy, which is essentially when you invest very small sums of money over a long period of time. The lump sum strategy, on the other hand, is when you have a bucket of money and you essentially dump it into the stock market all at once and then let it ride out. Now, if you're a numbers-driven person and you only want to focus on returns, which strategy is better? Believe it or not, it's actually the lump sum investing strategy. Over the long term, the lump sum investing strategy offers better returns than the DCA strategy. So here's what I did in order to make money in the last recession. First, I set up my DCA plan. I decided how much money I wanted to invest and how often, right? So whether that's once a month, twice a month, once a week, you name it. And then I decided where my money should be invested in. So in my case, I decided to invest in the S&P 500 index. Once I started my DCA strategy, I also made sure to have 3% of my overall portfolio available in just cash. And that cash I used with the lump sum strategy, and I invested that cash whenever I saw a decline in the market, specifically in COVID. So I was kind of using a mixture of both the DCA strategy and the lump sum investing strategy together. The truth of the matter is, you really never know when a recession happens, right? And that's because recessions are oftentimes confirmed way after they start. For example, the Great Recession of 2008 actually started in December of 2007 and wasn't announced that it was an actual recession until 1 year later in December of 2008. So on average, there's about a 6 to 12 month delay until it's actually announced that you are in a recession. And that's why it might not always make sense to just wait using the lump sum strategy, which is exactly why I started doing a combination of the two. Investing using the DCA strategy automatically every single month, and then having some sort of dry powder in the form of cash on the sidelines, and then using the lump sum strategy and investing it in the markets. And finally, step 8, which is diversifying your investments. I personally live by the motto of never put your eggs all in one basket. On average, if you have a 100% stock portfolio, the standard deviation of that is 16.98%. Now, standard deviation, if you don't know what that is, it's essentially just a measure of volatility. So how high up does it go and how low does it go as well? And that's honestly pretty high, a 16.98% in standard deviation. Now compare that to a 70-30 portfolio where instead of 100% of your money being invested in stocks, only 70% of your money is invested in stocks and the other 30% is invested in bonds or other cash-like instruments. A 70-30 portfolio doesn't have a standard deviation of 16.98% like a 100% stock portfolio does. No. In fact, the standard deviation of a 70-30 is about 10.23%. Even though there's much less stock exposure in a 70-30 portfolio, what do you think the rate of return is over the last 49 years? Well, my friend, the rate of return for a 70-30 portfolio versus a 100% stock portfolio is pretty similar, believe it or not. And the real reason behind that is simply the fact of diversification. First, it lowers your risk exposure. Second, it offsets stock volatility with exposure to bonds or real estate, for example, which can act as buffers. Third, diversification is also a way to generate different types of cash flow. So for example, stocks, they produce dividends. Bonds can produce interest. real estate can produce rental income, and so on and so forth. So how can you actually start diversifying your investments? Honestly, my friend, I would simply start by not just investing in tech stocks, for example. Even though tech stocks have kind of made a comeback in 2023, if you remember back to 2022, they were decimated. And you can still see some of the effects, especially in early 2023, with all of these layoffs, especially in the tech sector, with Meta or Facebook. We got Microsoft, we had Google, and a couple of other layoffs as well that were pretty prominent in 2023. Obviously, you have to know what's best for your personal situation before you start diving headfirst and start investing. So if you're ready to start building financial freedom, check out this video right here. You'll love it, and I'll explain step by step how you can escape the 9-to-5 rat race and build your way to financial freedom.